Do you believe faith can transform lives? Then get ready for an emotional story that will touch your heart. Discover how a determined mother faced her greatest challenges and moved mountains, all through the power of faith. This journey of resilience and hope will inspire you to never give up, no matter how big the obstacle. Don't miss it. Click now to watch the video that might just change the way you see life. Are you ready to feel the power of faith? Join us. It was a cold day in Golden, a small town in Colorado, when Megan Williams parked her car in an empty lot, the muffled sound of rain tapping against the windshield breaking the oppressive silence that filled the space. The town, with its quiet streets and towering mountains in the background, seemed oblivious to the chaos consuming Megan's life. She sat alone, staring at a pile of overdue bills resting on the passenger seat, a cruel reminder of how precarious her situation had become. The raindrops streaking down the window seemed to reflect the tears she held back, afraid of breaking down completely. Megan was a 32-year-old single mother and a dedicated nurse. At least, she was until she lost her job 3 months ago, when the local hospital implemented budget cuts during an economic downturn. As if that weren't enough, her 8-year-old son, Ethan, had been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, a condition requiring constant and expensive treatments. The small apartment they shared was on the verge of being taken away, and the medical bills had soared far beyond anything Megan could afford. She felt the weight of responsibility crushing her, as if the very mountains of Golden were pressing down on her shoulders. As the car sat parked, Megan opened the glove compartment and took out an old Bible. She held it for a moment, feeling the worn leather under her fingers, before opening it at random. Her eyes landed on Matthew 17 verse 20. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, "Move from here to there," and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. The words, familiar since her childhood in a Christian community, felt distant now. It was hard to believe in miracles when her life was falling apart. A knock on the car window jolted her from her thoughts. Megan startled, quickly wiping away her tears. Outside, a hooded figure gestured for her to lower the window. Hesitant, she pressed the button, and a young worker from a nearby cafe asked if she was okay. Megan forced a smile and said yes, but the young man seemed to sense the lie in her voice. He left a cup of hot coffee on the car hood before walking away, saying only, "I hope your day gets better." That small act of kindness was enough to break Megan's emotional dam. She began to cry silently, clutching the Bible against her chest as if it were an anchor. As much as she wanted to believe, her faith felt like a distant echo of what it once was. What had happened to the confidence she had in God when she was younger? Where was the strength promised in the sermons she heard on Sundays? The questions hammered at her mind, and for the first time in years, Megan whispered a prayer. "God, if you're still there, I need help. I don't know what to do anymore." As the words left her lips, Megan felt a brief sense of relief, as though she had released some of the burden she carried. However, reality remained relentless. She closed the Bible and put it back in the glove compartment, starting the car engine. As she left the parking lot, a new determination began to stir within her, albeit still wrapped in uncertainty. Megan knew she needed to make difficult decisions, but something inside her, however faint, told her that this wasn't the final word in her story. Megan parked her car in front of the small apartment she rented in Golden. The old brick building, with its worn red walls and rusty staircase, was a constant reminder of how stable life had seemed a few years ago. As she entered, the smell of toasted bread from the kitchen greeted her, followed by the quiet giggles of Ethan. He was sitting at the table, coloring a sheet of paper while a bowl of cereal rested beside him. Despite everything, Ethan's presence brought warmth to Megan's tumultuous world. Ethan was a bright boy with curious brown eyes and a level of energy that defied his medical condition. Megan knew he understood more than he let on. He rarely complained about the endless hospital visits or the restrictions his health imposed, but she could see in his eyes that he felt the weight of their situation. It broke her heart. He was the reason Megan got out of bed every day, even when every move felt like an overwhelming effort. Megan's daily routine had changed drastically since losing her job at the hospital. Her days had once been filled with long shifts, where she helped patients and felt her work made a difference. Now, she spent hours at home trying to balance bills, making calls to healthcare providers, and researching treatment options for Ethan. Each attempt to find help was met with another closed door. The lack of adequate insurance was an insurmountable obstacle, and every unanswered call was a cruel reminder of how harsh the system could be. As she prepared dinner that night, Megan looked out the kitchen window, watching the faint city lights against the darkening sky. Her thoughts wandered back to her childhood in Denver, where she had grown up in a close-knit, religious family. Her father, a pastor at a local church, had always emphasized the importance of faith, even in the toughest times. Megan remembered Sunday nights when everyone would gather to sing hymns and share stories of perseverance. They were simple times, but full of hope. Yet, adulthood, with its losses and disappointments, had worn down the faith that once seemed unshakable. The memory of her family brought a bittersweet smile to her face. Her parents had passed away years ago, and her contact with her siblings was limited, as they were all busy with their own lives. Megan felt alone, as if she were fighting a battle without allies. She knew she should seek support, but the shame of her situation held her back. She didn't want to be seen as a burden or, worse, as someone who had failed. After putting Ethan to bed, Megan returned to the living room, where she spread the stack of medical bills across the table. She was exhausted but knew she had to keep going. The experimental treatment Ethan needed was her top priority, but the cost was staggering. Her attempts to find a job were being thwarted by the local economy, which was also struggling to recover. Megan tried to recall the words she had read in the Bible that morning, but they seemed to slip away like grains of sand through her fingers. That night, Megan decided to write in an old journal she had found while cleaning the apartment. She began by describing her fears, her struggles, and eventually her prayers. She wrote about the guilt she felt for questioning her faith and how, despite everything, there was still a small spark of hope in her heart. It was a moment of vulnerability that made her realize it might be time to seek help in ways she had avoided before. The next morning, Megan woke up with a renewed sense of determination. Ethan needed her at her best, and she couldn't afford to give up. After dropping Ethan off at school, she went to a local church she had passed by many times. It was a simple building with a white cross on top and a sign that read, "God moves mountains, but you must take the first step." The words felt like a direct response to her doubts, and for the first time in a long while, Megan felt a spark of courage. Inside the church, she was greeted by Pastor Jacob Miller, a middle-aged man with a welcoming smile. He listened attentively as Megan shared part of her story. Jacob didn't offer immediate solutions but promised to pray for her and invited Megan to join a community meeting that Sunday. Although hesitant, Megan accepted, feeling that perhaps this was the beginning of something new. As she left, she realized that even though it was just a small step, she was finally moving her mountain. Sunday arrived with a gray, heavy sky, mirroring Megan's emotional state. For the first time in years, she dressed to go to church. She put on a simple blouse and quickly fixed her hair before helping Ethan tie his shoes. He seemed excited, his energy a stark contrast to the hesitation Megan felt as they approached the building. The small church, with its white walls and modest stained glass windows, suddenly felt enormous as she prepared to cross its threshold. Despite Pastor Jacob's encouragement earlier in the week, something inside her questioned whether she was truly ready to open up. When they entered the sanctuary, Megan was struck by its simple but welcoming atmosphere. The chairs were neatly arranged in rows, and the sound of a choir rehearsing filled the space with unexpected serenity. Ethan darted off to the children's area without hesitation, while Megan lingered near the entrance, unsure whether to stay or leave. That's when an elderly woman with gray hair and kind eyes approached her, extending a warm hand. "I'm Dorothy. I don't recognize you. Are you new here?" Before Megan could respond, tears began to well up. Dorothy, sensing her vulnerability, guided her to a nearby chair and sat beside her. Megan, through halting breaths, began to share her struggles. "I don't know where to start. Everything feels impossible right now. My life is upside down, and I feel like I'm losing my faith." Dorothy listened without interruption, holding Megan's hand firmly. When Megan finished, the older woman spoke with a calm yet resolute tone. "Sometimes, when we hit rock bottom, it's because we're about to be rebuilt. Don't lose hope. Dorothy's words resonated with Megan, but the sense of helplessness still clung to her like a heavy fog. During the sermon, Pastor Jacob spoke about facing adversity with faith, sharing examples of people who had overcome the impossible. Megan listened intently, though part of her mind remained preoccupied with calculating bills and pondering the challenges she'd have to face once she left the church. After the service, she approached Pastor Jacob to thank him for the message. He encouraged her to attend the church's community support group, which would meet on Wednesday. Megan agreed, though she wasn't convinced it would make a difference. That week, her problems seemed to intensify. On the way home after dropping Ethan off at school, her car began to smoke and broke down on the side of the road. Megan stepped out, frustrated, trying to figure out the issue with her limited knowledge of car mechanics. It was a cold day, and the feeling of isolation on the deserted road seemed like a reflection of her life at that moment. With her phone battery almost dead, she attempted to call for roadside assistance but got no immediate response. Sitting in the driver's seat, her hands trembling from the cold and anger, she felt despair rising within her. Just then, a car pulled up behind hers. A man in a mechanic's uniform stepped out, offering help. "I'm Michael. I saw your car stopped. Need a hand?" Megan nodded, holding back tears as she explained what had happened. Michael quickly inspected the engine and discovered a worn-out belt. Without charging her, he helped get the car running again but left a warning: "You'll need a full repair soon. Good luck." Megan thanked him, grateful for the act of kindness, but his warning lingered in her mind as yet another weight to carry. On Wednesday evening, Megan finally decided to attend the church's support group. Despite her exhaustion, she knew she needed to try something new. The meeting room was filled with people of different ages and backgrounds, all seeking hope. When it was her turn to speak, Megan hesitated before beginning. But then the words came in a flood. She spoke about Ethan's illness, losing her job, unpaid bills, and the feeling that God was distant. When she finished, the silence that followed was filled with compassionate glances. A woman named Emily, who looked to be in her early 40s, spoke next. She shared how she had overcome a terminal cancer diagnosis through a combination of faith, treatment, and the support of that very community. Her words were filled with gratitude, and she looked directly at Megan as she said, "I thought my life was over too, but God was working even when I couldn't see it." That testimony left Megan deep in thought. Maybe, just maybe, something greater was happening beyond what she could understand. At the end of the meeting, Pastor Jacob handed Megan a small notebook. "Write down your prayers, your doubts, anything you're feeling. Sometimes putting words on paper helps us see what God is doing." Megan accepted the gift and went home with a mix of emotions. She still didn't know how things would improve, but that night had planted a seed of hope in her heart. Megan spent the following week in a mix of uncertainty and cautious hope. Emily's testimony and the kindness she had encountered at church had planted something within her that she couldn't quite name. For the first time in a long while, she felt she wasn't entirely alone. That Saturday, after preparing breakfast for Ethan, Megan picked up the notebook Pastor Jacob had given her. She sat at the kitchen table, watching sunlight stream through the window and illuminate the blank pages. She began to write hesitantly, first listing her worries about Ethan and his health. Then, as if a dam had broken, the words poured out. Megan wrote about her fears of failing as a mother, the pain of losing her job, and the feeling that her faith had been lost amidst the chaos. At the end, she added a simple prayer. "God, I don't know how to move forward, but I trust you to show me the way." Closing the journal, Megan felt a small relief, as though a bit of her burden had been transferred to the pages. That afternoon, while Ethan watched cartoons in the living room, Megan decided it was time to act. Inspired by Emily's suggestion at the support group, she began researching ways to raise funds for Ethan's treatment. She discovered that many people used online platforms to share their stories and seek financial help. The idea intimidated her. Exposing her life to strangers felt daunting, but she knew she needed to try something new. With hesitation, Megan created a campaign. She titled it "A Miracle for Ethan" and included a picture of him smiling, holding a drawing he had made of their family. She wrote her story sincerely, explaining Ethan's condition, their financial struggles, and the urgency of the experimental treatment. Before publishing it, she whispered a quick prayer, asking for courage and guidance. When she finally hit submit, she felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Now, everything was out of her hands. In the days that followed, Megan checked the campaign page obsessively. At first, donations trickled in from close friends and distant relatives who sent encouraging messages. But something unexpected happened on Thursday. A local influencer who followed Pastor Jacob shared the campaign on social media. Suddenly, donations began pouring in from places Megan had never heard of. People left messages of support, assuring her that they were praying for Ethan and believing in his recovery. Despite the growing support, Megan knew they were still far from reaching their goal. Meanwhile, her daily life remained filled with challenges. The car, which had been running precariously since the roadside breakdown, finally gave out, forcing Megan to rely on public transportation to take Ethan to his medical appointments. Each hospital visit was a painful reminder of how little time they had. Ethan needed the treatment soon, and the uncertainty about when they could afford it weighed heavily on Megan. One night, after putting Ethan to bed, Megan received an unexpected call. It was from Dr. Adam Collins, a former colleague from the hospital where she used to work. He had heard about her situation and wanted to help. "Megan, I know it's not much, but I managed to convince the administration to organize a small fundraiser among the staff to support Ethan. Additionally, I've found some medical companies with assistance programs that might be useful." Megan thanked him, her voice trembling with emotion. It felt like yet another door had opened. The following Sunday, Megan attended church again. During the service, Pastor Jacob announced a community fundraiser dinner to support Ethan. Megan felt a mix of gratitude and doubt. Would people show up? Dorothy, the elderly woman who had comforted her during her first visit, reassured her, "You'd be surprised what faith and solidarity can accomplish," she said with a warm smile. On the night of the event, Megan was astonished to see the community center packed with people. Families, young adults, and even some elderly individuals from neighboring towns had come to support the cause. The dinner was a success, raising a substantial amount toward Ethan's treatment. During the event, Megan was invited to speak. Nervously, she stepped onto the stage and shared her story with honesty, thanking everyone and emphasizing how faith had begun to restore her hope. When she finished, the audience gave her a standing ovation, leaving Megan deeply moved. As the days turned into weeks, Megan noticed changes within herself. Despite ongoing difficulties, her perspective had shifted. She began writing in her journal every night, documenting not only the challenges but also the small daily miracles. From unexpected acts of kindness to generous anonymous donations, Megan saw each moment as a sign that God was present, even in the smallest details. The campaign continued to grow, and Megan started receiving messages from other mothers facing similar struggles. Many shared how faith had been crucial in their own journeys. These connections strengthened Megan's resolve, reminding her that her story was not just about overcoming hardship but also about inspiring others to hold onto faith. One afternoon, while at the hospital for another appointment with Ethan, Megan received life-changing news. Thanks to a combination of donations, community events, and support from the hospital, they had finally raised enough money to begin the treatment. Megan felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The first thing she did was take Ethan's hands and whisper, "We did it. God has been with us all along." That night, as she wrote in her journal, Megan reflected on the journey so far. The mountains in her life were still high, but she now felt strong enough to climb them. And as she watched Ethan sleeping peacefully, she knew that faith, no matter how small at first, had been the transformative force that kept her standing. When Megan received confirmation that Ethan could begin the experimental treatment, it felt as though an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders. However, the battle was far from over. The treatment would require regular trips to a specialized clinic in Denver, which meant additional expenses and time away from home. Furthermore, the doctors warned that although the treatment showed promising potential, it wouldn't guarantee immediate results and could involve severe side effects. Megan listened calmly, but deep down, she felt the familiar fear trying to creep back in. On the day of the first session, Megan and Ethan left home early. The road to Denver was long, winding through snow-covered mountains, a constant reminder of the challenges they had faced to get to this point. Ethan seemed optimistic, asking questions about the procedures and cracking jokes to lighten the mood. Megan admired his resilience, but she knew it was her responsibility to keep hope alive. When they arrived at the clinic, they were greeted by a team of doctors and nurses who patiently explained every step of the process. Megan felt grateful to meet such dedicated professionals, though her heart ached at the sight of other children in the waiting room, their faces marked by exhaustion. The initial sessions were difficult. Ethan experienced frequent nausea and was more tired than usual. Megan, on the other hand, could barely sleep, dividing her time between caring for him and ensuring the rest of their lives continued functioning. The trips to Denver became an exhausting routine, but Megan stayed focused. She knew she couldn't let fear or fatigue disrupt the progress they had made. One night, as she wrote in her journal, Megan poured out her feelings of guilt for questioning whether she was truly doing the right thing. She wrote, "God, I know I said I trusted you, but there are moments when I feel like I'm not strong enough. Please give me clarity and courage to continue." Shortly afterward, she received an unexpected message from Emily, the woman who had shared her story of survival at the support group. Emily asked how Megan was doing and offered to help cover some of the travel expenses. "You're not alone in this," Emily wrote. The message brought tears to Megan's eyes and renewed her determination. The true test came during Ethan's 5th session, when he had a severe reaction to the treatment. He woke in the middle of the night with a high fever and difficulty breathing. Megan rushed him to the nearest hospital, her heart racing with every passing minute. In the emergency room, as she waited for the doctors to stabilize Ethan, she prayed more fervently than ever. "God, he's in your hands. I can't do this alone." After hours of waiting, the doctors assured her that the reaction was serious but manageable. Ethan would need rest and closer monitoring, but the treatment could continue. That episode deeply shook Megan, but it also reinforced her faith. She realized that despite the hardships, God had provided the resources and people necessary to help her face each obstacle. In a conversation with Pastor Jacob, she admitted, "I thought my faith was strong enough, but now I see I'm still learning to fully trust." He responded with an encouraging smile, "Faith isn't about never doubting, Megan. It's about continuing even when we don't have all the answers." In the following days, Ethan began showing signs of improvement. Though the challenges persisted, he was more energetic and even asked to start drawing again, something he had stopped doing due to fatigue. To Megan, this was a small miracle, and it reaffirmed her belief that they were on the right path. She knew the journey was far from over, but with each step, they were closer to reaching the summit of their mountain. The months that followed were marked by ups and downs, but something inside Megan had changed. Each passing day proved that faith wasn't a shield that eliminated challenges but a strength that helped her face them with courage. Ethan was showing significant progress in his treatment, and the doctors were optimistic about the preliminary results. Seeing his smile return and his energy slowly coming back was the greatest gift Megan could have asked for. It was a reminder that every sacrifice and effort had been worth it. One sunny afternoon, as Megan and Ethan strolled through the local park, he held her hand and asked, "Mom, do you think God listens when we ask for something really hard?" Megan paused for a moment, looking at her son, who seemed so small against the backdrop of the towering mountains. She replied sincerely, "I think God always listens, Ethan. Sometimes he answers in ways we don't expect, but he's always taking care of us." Ethan smiled, satisfied with her answer, and ran off to play on the swings. That conversation lingered in Megan's mind as she reflected on how much her perspective had shifted since the beginning of their journey. She used to see faith as something that should guarantee immediate solutions to her problems. Now, she understood that faith was an ongoing process, a daily choice to believe in what couldn't be seen, even amid uncertainty. Every small step forward in Ethan's health, every act of kindness she had received, and every moment of quiet prayer had profoundly transformed her. Determined to give back the support she had received, Megan began participating in community initiatives. She joined the church's support group, offering comfort and advice to other mothers facing difficult situations. She also started sharing her story at local events, emphasizing the importance of never giving up, even when everything seemed hopeless. Her honesty and humility resonated with everyone who listened, and her story began to inspire others to find strength in their faith. On Ethan's 9th birthday, the church organized a special celebration to mark the progress he had made. During the event, Megan was invited to the stage to speak. With her heart full of gratitude, she thanked everyone who had walked alongside her, from the doctors and donors to her friends at church. "When I started this journey," she said, "I didn't know how it would be possible to overcome so many difficulties. But I've learned that faith doesn't remove mountains. It gives us the strength to climb them. Today, I can say I was never alone because God was with me every step of the way." The audience gave her a standing ovation, leaving Megan deeply moved. As she looked at Ethan playing with the other children, she felt she had reached a new chapter in her life. The struggle wasn't entirely over, but she knew she had what it took to keep going. More importantly, she understood that her faith was a light that could guide not only her but also others through their own journeys. That night, as she wrote in her journal, Megan reflected on how much she had learned. She wrote, "The faith that moves mountains isn't made of grand moments but of small, consistent steps. It's believing that even when we can't see the path, God is already preparing the next step." She closed the journal with a smile, knowing that despite all the challenges, her life was now a living testimony to the power of faith. And so, Megan and Ethan's story didn't end with a magical solution but with the certainty that every obstacle was an opportunity to grow and trust. The mountains in their lives had been moved, not by an instant miracle but by the strength of a faith that didn't give up even in the darkest moments. Together, mother and son moved forward, knowing the future, though uncertain, was filled with possibilities. If this story touched your heart and inspired you, don't forget to show your support. Like this video, leave a comment sharing what moved you the most, and share it with someone who could use a little hope today. Your interaction helps spread messages like this to more people. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more life-changing stories. Thank you for being part of this journey.